Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular council afternoon meeting of Monday, June the 27th. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel at youtube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. You can attend council chambers in person. If you wish to do so, register in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in council chambers. Watch the meeting live or recorded on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. If you wish to speak during the meeting, you can register in advance.
Hello.
During the public comment opportunities found under items 6 and 9, if you wish to speak, you're asked to register in advance by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with your name, civic address, and how you will be participating, whether in person, telephone, or Zoom. When you register, you will receive further details. Fourth, you can request to speak during the meeting. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, there may be an opportunity, time permitting. After I have provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. The conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 485186. Corporate Officer, are there any late items to introduce other than the notice of motion? Oh, that's in the evening, yes, of course. Boy, I think I'm on the evening already, that's twice. Approval of the agenda as presented. Councillor Traynor, thank you. Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Thank you. And adoptions of the meeting, of the minutes from the June 13th Committee of the Whole and the regular afternoon meeting. Councillor Patton. Councillor Barkwell, thank you. All in favor? Great. Good, so we'll move right along to our delegation today, 5.1. Chris Garish is joining us from the RDOS. He's the planning manager there. He'll be speaking to us about the regional district of South Okanagan and South Okanagan Regional Growth Strategy Review.
There we go. Learning as I go. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I think I've met most of you here through the RDOS, so I'm assuming there's going to be a fairly good understanding of the RGS. But I am here to present some proposed changes that we are putting forward in relation to the strategy. Am I in control of this here? Oh, there we go. So I just want to start with some basic background for council's benefit. So as a strategy, it was drafted, it took us a fair number of years, 6 between 2004 and 2010. But unlike your typical regional district bylaw, the regional growth strategy is actually a participant bylaw in that Penticton, Summerland, Oliver, and Osoyoos have committed, along with electoral areas A, C, D, E, F, and I, which are basically our South Okanagan electoral areas, to work together in meeting the goals and objectives within the RGS. And in terms of what those may be, I just have a quick quote from the legislation here, which is basically that, you know, as a group together, we're working to promote human settlement within the Valley. That work relates to social, economic, and environmental issues, and essentially trying to make the best and efficient use of available facilities and services that are provided within the Valley. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the whole structure of the RGS because the review that we are contemplating is fairly limited. But again, In terms of the policies that are in the document, they run the gamut from housing and development, ecosystems, infrastructure, community health, et cetera, as you can see in the dot points here. And these are all objectives and policies that, again, the member municipalities and the electoral areas are working on together. But from the planning department's perspective, the one that we use the most and the one that usually comes before the board is the housing and development section, which relates to growth and, well, obviously development within the valley. So at the moment, as you can see here on this slide, we have a map that accompanies this particular part of the RGS, and it shows all the existing settlement areas. And that, as the overriding primary goal that we've all committed to is to try to focus development within serviced areas, which have been designated as primary. And also there are some rural growth areas that have been designated based on existing zoning that allows, in some instances, up to 200 or more units to be created. And just going along to the next slide. So again, for council's benefit, Summerland has been designated as a primary growth area. So it's one of the principal focus points for growth and development. And that's for the obvious reason that as a municipality, you have the infrastructure, the services, the amenity, employment opportunities, healthcare services, transportation, et cetera, to support that. The rural growth areas are obviously the smaller unincorporated areas. Those include Narramatic, Lead, and Apex. And in the context of electoral area F, which is the electoral area that surrounds the district, we have Greta Ranch down as a rural growth area. So, and again, sorry, I'm just spending some more time on some background context here. So as you're likely aware, your OCP, because you are a participant in the RGS, is required to then link back to the RGS and explain how you as a council are helping to further the objectives and the policies. And so for the municipalities, that's generally done through your regional context statement. And so I picked out an example here that just shows, again, because we are focusing on housing and development, how the municipality is meeting that goal. So Summerland is trying to recognize the critical link between infrastructure and human settlement, and it's got the numbered policies and objectives within the OCP that support that RGS objective. The other key point too, and you can see here, this is a map from your OCP, you have established a growth area boundary, which is one of the commitments that you made in being a participant to the RGS. We have similar commitments in the electoral areas, which we've been slowly tackling as we review the various official community plans for each of our communities. So beginning in 2013, we did electoral area D, which is OK Falls. 2016, we did Cleveland and Apex. 2018 was an interesting one. That's when we did electoral area F, which is again the unincorporated area around Summerland. And it was with this particular OCP review that we first started to get feedback from the community that there were some concerns around some of the rural growth areas that have been designated within the RGS, and that there may be a need to review the suitability of those going forward, and that the next time the RGS was reviewed, that should be undertaken. So Area F, Greta Ranch, was identified, maybe not suitable anymore as a rural growth area. Conversely, and I've got it in brackets, West Bench, which is the neighborhood just outside of Penticton on the west side, was flagged for possible inclusion as a rural growth area, subject to water and sewer being put in. And again, something similar happened last year when we reviewed our electoral area AOCP. The Willow Beach area and Anarchist Mountain were both put forward as questionable growth areas going forward, and that they should be reviewed for their suitability. So again, just some more background. I just wanted to focus in on the one in Area F. Again, if you're not familiar with it, this is the Greta Ranch rural growth area. And so it's actually two discontiguous parts. And the reason for that is because of the ALR lands in between these two. But you can see here, it's basically the property from the campground north to the ALR boundary, and then the remaining part to the north, which I think is where Greta has all of their medium density residential zoning existing. So this is what informed our review of the RGS, which is what I'm here to present to you today. There was this need to look at the rural growth areas in electoral area F and A. And there was also a concern that has been flagged at the RDOS board table, which for those of you who are rural directors will be aware of. We've had proposals come forward in the past that relate to development outside of the rural growth areas. And it's been a challenge in terms of how to assess these based on the structure of the current RGS. Which is very black and white. Either you're in a growth area or you're not. And if you're not, the strategy has some vague references to infill development occurring, nothing that changes the rural character of the area, but it doesn't provide very clear guidance. So the examples I have up here on this slide, they range in electoral areas, but basically they all involved proposals to facilitate multi-lot subdivisions that required official community plan amendments that staff felt were inconsistent with the RGS, but the board felt was consistent, which is fine. But it just highlights a potential problem with the current strategy and that it's not maybe reflecting the board's position on some of these developments in the rural areas. So there was a need identified to address that. So we've been working on that since the project commenced in 2020. It's been a slow road for a variety of reasons, but we were able to get a proposal up for discussion to the Regional District Board on June 2nd, which I believe some of the councillors here who are directors would have participated in. And the direction that was set, which I'll cover in the next few slides, was basically to update the growth management map and to revise the objectives and policies relating to housing and development. In terms of no changes, because the original proposal did have us looking at climate action and also the housing needs assessment, we're still proposing to go forward with that. But it's the housing and development section that changes the most. Now, I understand you might have had a copy of this map in your agenda, but the one at the left is what's currently in the RGS. And as I was saying, it's a very black and white document in terms of you're either a growth area or you're not. The image at the right is what we're proposing to move towards, which presents, at least from our perspective at the staff level, a more nuanced approach to guiding development in a rural area, and it attempts to better reflect historically what's occurred in some of these communities in terms of the provision of servicing, such as, well, for us, the crucial ones are water and sewer, and subdivision patterns, and how we'd like to see some of these areas developed or maybe maintained as they currently are with no change going forward. So I'll just do a quick run through of some of the new categories that we're proposing, and I appreciate this is all probably new to you, but for the main, what are currently the primary growth areas, really there's not too much of a change being proposed. We are suggesting that they continue to be called growth areas. This designation would continue to apply to the whole of the District of Summerland, and Penticton, Oliver, and Osoyoos, and also OK Falls is the fifth member of this category. We are proposing the introduction of a new measurement criteria. And again, it's very simple at this point. We might, depending on the feedback we get throughout this process, modify it. But for the 10-year period between the 2021 census and the 2031 census, as a goal for the RGS, we'd ideally like to see if we can try to direct 95% of future growth as measured by population increase to the member municipalities in OK Falls as the principal receiving centers for urban development. And again, as I was saying earlier, this is primarily because the municipalities have all the services, employment opportunities, everything else to support this kind of growth, whereas you don't necessarily get that in the rural areas. The second category we have is the resort area, and it's primarily because we had a hard time trying to figure out where to fit Apex otherwise. We recognize that the town of Osoyoos is technically a resort municipality. However, it's also an urban center, so we're not proposing it for this one. That just leaves Apex. Apex does have a full range of services, tourism accommodation, commercial opportunities, etc. So it's its own category. Village settlement area. So this would primarily apply, I've got the example of Naramata here. Cleedon is also another example, and I believe Gallagher Lake would round out the three proposed settlement areas. So this is somewhat different. We don't envision a significant amount of growth in these areas. At the end of the day, they're not incorporated municipalities. They still are electoral areas. But in terms of providing funding or focusing funding for new water and sewer, these would be at the top of the list for the regional district as well as for population growth. Rural residential, so again, another example from Area F, which surrounds you. This is the West Bench. Again, I'm using RD context here when I describe relatively small parcel sizes, less than a hectare, but that's generally what we see. So these communities that we're designating as rural residential already have water or sewer, and there may be limited capacity for future servicing, but we don't see significant residential growth occurring in these, primarily because previous settlement patterns, subdivisions, difficult to do infill, and there may also be other limiting factors, such as the West Bench has geotech concerns. Falder obviously has water scarcity issues, as does Twin Lakes, and St. Andrews has the whole consideration of the radio frequency interference area associated with DREO. Rural areas, again, so we call this moderate parcel sizes over a hectare in area. But in terms of future community servicing, the regional growth strategy would be saying no. We do not envision water and community sewer being provided at these locations. We do not envision future densification occurring, beyond what existing zoning allows for in terms of parcel size and subdivision. Agricultural areas is a new designation, but a lot of the policies within the RGS would remain the same, but we're trying to map out where some of these areas are. So the screenshot here shows the ALR lands that exist to the west of the district, out into the Trout Community Watershed area, up along Prince and Summerland Road and Prairie Valley. And so really the idea here with these lands is to preserve their agricultural potential. Again, to the extent that servicing such as water might be extended, it would be for agricultural uses, not really for residential development. And then finally, well, actually I have another finally, but finally we have resource area and open space. So this is everything else, which is primarily Crown land, which can comprise community watersheds, provincial parks, protected areas, environmentally sensitive habitat. And again, similar to the last slide, lands within this designation we do not see being serviced at all, that property owners in this area should have no expectations about receiving community water or community sewer. My final designation is so this is a new one, and we're trying to address some issues that have come up in relation to the observatory, and council may or may not be aware of this, but the St. Andrews development to the north of DREO has been the subject of a land use contract since it was established back in the 1970s. And as council may also be aware, land use contracts are ceasing to exist in 2024. So the province and the federal government have been trying to negotiate or work through a settlement in terms of how to protect the observatory going forward. At the regional district level, we're expecting them to look for some form of local government involvement in that process. We're not quite sure what form that's going to take, but this is kind of an anticipatory step here. We'd like to put a designation into the RGS in relation to DREO that basically speaks to the observatory's concerns, which we understand to be the potential for new land use designations being introduced to the RFI area that could impact the operation of the observatory itself. So at the moment, and again, if you're familiar with the RD system, that would be a participant vote. Land use decisions are the rural electoral area directors. So in order to have a land use change, that's a 5-member majority vote out of 9 participating members. If this proposed amendment makes it into the RGS, that would change that voting structure to a participant vote, because we do see the observatory as being a regionally significant investment, not only by the federal government, but also in terms of employment and just the level of research going on there. So an RGS vote would bring all the member municipalities as well as the electoral areas into the discussion, and that would be a 14-member vote. So that's one of the proposals that we have. And just to wrap it up, next steps. So my purpose here today is basically just to refamiliarize council with the RGS itself and give a brief overview of the proposed amendments that we're looking at. We had a consultation plan that was approved by the board. So for us at a staff level, we'll now be going through that plan, organizing public information sessions, visiting the other councils. We need to get the draft amendment bylaw finalized. We'll recirculate it to the member municipalities for your formal input or feedback. And then we'll return to the regional district board. I think at this point it might be a challenge to make it before the election. So probably later in the year or early 2023 before we bring this back. But that's where we're at the moment, and I'm happy to take any questions that council may have, and I thank you for hearing me out today.
Thanks, Chris. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Council, are there questions? Councillor Barkle.
Has the observatory identified an area that and said, we'd like to see no more development within this, I don't know, say 10-mile radius or whatever, or 5-kilometer radius? Or
well, historically, I think the observatory as well as ourselves have relied on the radio interference map. And I mean, I'm a layperson when it comes to the information that informs that, but I understand the observatory updated it about 7-8 years ago and provided us with a new RFI layer, which we then used to update all of our plans in 2017. And so within that layer is basically where we understand they would prefer not to see any further residential development occur. Now, we recognize that at Twin Lakes, there's existing zoning that could allow for future development, and that the current land use contract at St. Andrews, which has about another 2 years of life left on it, does contemplate another 50 unfinished lots being created, which I think the observatory accepts. But beyond that, the preference I think would be not to see any further development within that that purple area I had on the slide earlier.
They're one and the same then.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you'd be able to return to the slide with the growth areas, the map there with Summerland and surrounding areas.
This one here? Or?
No, keep. Oh, yeah, next one. There, that one
okay.
there. So, so all of Summerland is shown as a growth area on the RGS. But as you noted, we have our own growth area boundaries within the district of Summerland, which is much smaller than the pink area you have there.
Yep.
And so when you look at that map and you see like that purple between Falder and the border of Summerland, you know, that's rural residential, and it implies that it's kind of snugged up right next to a growth area, but it's not, because our growth area boundary goes nowhere near there. And so my question is, why can't the RGS incorporate our growth areas as well, those boundaries? Why can't they be represented on the RGS map?
Well, the short answer is they can. There's nothing stopping us. I mean, to be frank, we had that discussion at a staff level at the RD, and there was, I think, about 10 different versions of this map prepared, and we were cycling through different options to see how they worked. And our concern, because we did have one version that did attempt to show all the growth boundaries for the municipalities outside or separate from their municipal boundaries. And I mean, we're open to receiving feedback from all the municipalities on this and potentially changing our direction. But at this point, we went forward with this outline on the basis that we didn't want the RGS to constrain the member municipalities if they had a desire within their own municipal boundaries to amend or expand their growth boundary. Because if we did show it on there and you did want to make a change, I think the way we're setting this up is that theoretically that would then trigger an amendment to the RGS, which could be seen as potentially onerous for the municipalities. And again, from the RD's perspective, it's like, well, why would we want to limit the municipality's ability to grow within their boundaries if they have the servicing and ability to support that development, right? So that's basically what informed this particular layout.
Follow up, if I may.
Follow up?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a discussion we ought to have. You know, certainly our own growth area boundary works for us here in Summerland, but I think when you're looking on a regional level, you know, people outside Summerland don't know what our growth boundaries are necessarily, and you look at that map and you think, oh yeah, okay, well we can develop right outside that boundary there because that's a residential area, and it's kind of, I find it a little bit misleading to the public. And you know, I note that we did recently on the RDS board approve Soyuz's OCP. So is that the sort of thing that you would foresee that anytime we'd want to change our urban growth area, then they would have to go to the board for approval, or is it more complicated than that?
I'd probably have to look into it. Like the example that you're raising with the Soyuz is they have to, well, because they're a participant to the RGS, well, I guess there's two things at play. Their OCP has to be subject to what the legislation calls early and ongoing consultation, and that includes referring it to any local government that might be impacted. the regional district is a local government that adjoins the town on all of its boundaries. So they sent it to us in that context, but they also sent it to us because they had a context statement within their new OCP that tied back to the RGS, which the board as a group had to accept. And I think that would be different than if we had, say, Summerland's growth boundary embedded within this proposed new map in the RGS, and then Summerland came back at some future point and said, we want to amend our growth boundary. I mean, I'd be happy to investigate it further, but my first instinct is that, well, that would then require an amendment to the RGS, and the district wouldn't be able to do that until the RGS had been amended first, which could take many, many months. And, you know, depending on what your timeline is based on your proposed growth boundary change, you know, it might cause potential delay, I suppose. So.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Carlson, we're going to go to Brad first to get another response on that.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just from district staff's perspective, I think I would just advise council to be cautious with that approach, because that would reduce the flexibility for future councils in making decision-making for land use planning purposes within our own boundary. It's definitely something like Chris is right. Something we could do. It would further constrain those councils to be within the urban growth boundary for any future development. And just as a recent example is that rezoning and potential subdivision on Prairie Valley Road at the toe of Cartwright Mountain was required a amendment to our urban growth boundary, if council recalls. And so that is an OCP amendment process. But if we had our OCP boundary or urban growth boundary, sorry, in the RGS, it would have triggered an RGS amendment and would probably be a lot more difficult for a developer to move forward with a project in that location. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. It's important for us to know that. Councillor Carlson, then Trainer, then myself, and then Councillor Barkville.
Thank you, Mayor Boot. So I had a similar question to Councillor Holmes, and I guess after hearing the explanation, my question is whether, you know, you show us our urban growth boundary, so it's in the presentation, and it's helpful to be able to see that. Would all of the urban growth boundaries, if they were just appendixes to your, like, will they be in there so people can see them, or will be there a way for someone to say, how do I find out what Summerland's urban growth boundary is? I'm going to look at the map of the outline of Summerland. Now I need to go to Summerland to find that, just so that we don't, like Councillor Holmes said, look like we can build the entire, or that our boundary goes all the way out to Falter.
Okay, so at this point, there's no appendix proposed to the RGS that would show the growth boundary. And again, for the similar reasons we just talked about, I would potentially discourage council from considering that, because we would have to then similarly amend those appendices every time you changed your growth boundary. So it would just simply be the pink layer shown here. And yeah, the expectation would be is that the further establishment of the urban growth boundaries would be within each member municipality's OCP and in the context of electoral area D in their OCP as well. So
is there a way in the RGS for people reading that to very easily go to City of Penticton, District of Summerland, City, Town of Oliver, like without having to go searching all over the internet to find out what the actual urban growth boundary is? Or is that like putting a link in or putting some context, or does that also not fit properly?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how that could work, because of course my concern would be if we had a very specific link to Summerland's OCP within the RGS and that link changed. Again, we wouldn't be able to amend that link within the bylaw unless we formally amended the bylaw, which gets us into this whole process again, right? So, I mean, it could be that we add some descriptive entry in the background section, like that if people are interested in the growth boundaries for their particular municipality, they're encouraged to review that municipality's official community plan. But anything more specific than that would be difficult. I mean, we could certainly, because we have a dedicated RGS webpage on the RDOS site. I mean, we could build in links there to help facilitate people finding this information, but I would be, again, hesitant to put it right into the bylaw.
Councillor Trainer.
I just have one more thought on this. Sorry to keep talking about it, but what I understand why it is the way it is, but for the purposes of transparency and at the end of the day, accuracy when it comes to the public looking at these maps, could you not do like a layer, like another shade underneath the pink or something that shows like our current, like our district's current boundaries within the designated growth area that the regional district has established? And then even that could, you know, we could even put a little note that says like that little section is subject to change or something like that, just so that people have an idea, a better idea of where growth is actually happening. And then I just think that that's clear for everybody. And it kind of, there's an umbrella over top of the regional district, and then it's kind of obvious that we have our little bylaws, and well, not little, but our layer as well underneath.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to describe because I don't have a copy of the RGS here, but I suspect your OCP is probably structured the same as our RGS, where you have your background section, you get into your objectives, and then you get into your policies. So what I'm hearing, and again, just because my concern is I don't want to formally embed it within the map schedule, but it could be that within the background description part of the housing and development section that we can put in the municipality's existing growth boundaries as they occurred on this day that we adopted the bylaw. And it's indicative only. It's not formally part of the bylaw. Well, it's in the bylaw, but it's not part of that formal part that we would be using when we assess different development applications and whatnot. So I don't know if that would suit council. I mean, I believe we already have your mapping data for the growth boundaries, so we have that information available to us.
Brad, did you want to respond any further?
Yeah, a couple of comments. Thank you, Your Worship. I do want to point out that there is a policy in the background document for the new housing and development section from Chris here that states that we as primary growth areas should establish growth containment boundaries within our boundary within each of our respective community's official community plans. So that's a policy statement in the RGS. So a developer looking at the RGS can potentially see that and maybe realize that they have to go review the potential growth containment boundary within our official community plan through that policy statement. And similarly, I know the city of Penticton as well has a boundary as well, a growth containment area. I think Asuyas perhaps as well. You know, a developer would probably note that. But you know, if it's possible to have a layer, I think for visual purposes, it could be helpful, yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Thanks, Brad. I have, what do I have? 3 questions. You were mentioning that Greta Ranch rural area was going to be taken out of the RGS. That the Greta Ranch is for sale now, 155 acres, I think, in total. And I'm wondering where the onus lies on letting potential buyers know. Is that a responsibility of the realtor? Letting, you know, if they're under the impression, reading the RGS now, that that's rural, an area that's identified as a rural development area, and they go ahead and purchase and then learn that, well, it's under review, so you can't really do anything at this time. I'm just wondering where the onus lies on making sure that potential buyers are aware of that. Because that could be not very pleasant in terms of legal issues.
Yeah. Well, so our position is they need to do their due diligence and buyer beware. But we are also advising every person who's coming in, you know, because up until that recent announcement, we know that the property right beside the campground has been for sale for many years. And we've been receiving a lot of queries about it. And we tell everybody who's been coming in that, yes, it is a rural growth area at the moment. However, we've also received direction from our board to review the RGS, and the official community plan has flagged this as maybe not a suitable location. It, you know, subject to board direction, may be coming off, right? So you need to be aware of that. You know, the property right beside the campground is interesting because it's a tourist commercial zoning, which requires that a campground be established before any other motel or hotel use can be put on the parcel. But the zoning on Greta Ranch is different in that they've already got, I believe, medium density and single detached dwelling density for 300 to 400 units. And so that would not change as part of the RGS. All we're changing is the category from rural growth area to, I believe it's rural residential would be the new classification. So yeah, so we at the regional district, we are advising people who ask, but if they never ask us, then it's hard for us to get that information across to them.
Okay, thank you. So it is, the onus lies on the regional district then?
Well, I
Is
would
that
say,
what you're saying to me?
well, I would say the onus lies on any prospective purchaser to.
Well, yes, but in order to get that information, the RDOS is the place to go for that information?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. My second question, and I'm not sure that I heard this right. You were talking about the funding priorities for water and sewer,
Mhm.
and I think I heard you say Apex and Naramata, and there was a third one? Was
Well,
it?
yeah, there's a few. So again, I'll state this from the regional district's perspective. So,
Yes.
you know, there's only ever a limited amount of money or funding available for community sewer and community water, and what are our priorities going to be? And so we use the RGS to help us with those priorities. So first and foremost for us would be OK Falls, because it's our one and only primary growth area in an electoral area. After that, under the proposal, would be Naramata, Kaleden, and Gallagher Lake. Apex as a resort area would also be considered a priority, although I believe the water and sewer up at Apex are privately owned and operated and run by the resort. And beyond that, we don't really see new services being extended to the other communities. Some of them may already have, though, like say Willowbrook has an existing community water system. That's fine. That system may need require upgrades in the future. That's great, but those upgrades shouldn't be extending the service out to new areas because it's not really seen or deemed to be suitable for further residential development, right?
Thank you. And then my final question is there any involvement in the Okanagan Nation Alliance in the discussions around this review?
There will be. I believe our consultation plan requires or suggested that we will be reaching out to the bands in the area to seek their input and basically also to let them know what we're doing with the changes and to see what they think about it. So,
thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we're in danger of making this unnecessarily complicated. I think you just need to say for growth areas within municipalities, consult the municipality's official community plan. End of story. I don't want to see us hindered in any way by bureaucracy of going through the regional district. It just doesn't seem necessary. And also, it's not the way things really happen. It's not like a developer comes along and looks at the maps and says, oh, where can I develop? It's more like there's a piece of property, somebody researches what the potential is and then tries to sell it with the work done on where it fits within the, the official community plan and the regional growth strategy and things like that. So the map's not going to deceive anybody. It's just what we use as the planning part of it. And then the individual, because all development's done by developers, capitalists, and they're going to do their research and they're going to know what they're doing. If not, they're going to lose money.
I agree with you, Councillor Barkwell. On this particular point, I agree. Any other questions for Chris? Okay, Councillor Holmes. Okay.
I don't entirely agree with Councillor Barkwell. There's many examples of developments just outside municipal boundaries because they don't fit into the municipality's rules, but they can get away with it by developing just outside the boundary. And there's countless examples of that in the last 50, 100 years. And I think that's what we're trying to get away from. Anyway, that's just a comment. So I just have a question regarding the Greta Ranch. What is I guess the reason, the logic for making it rural residential rather than just keeping it tourist commercial?
Well, this has been the challenge as we've gone up and down the valley with some of these communities and just the historic patterns of development that have occurred. And some of them do have servicing, some of them don't. Some of them are earmarked for additional servicing. And with Greta, given the density that exists in that zoning, and I don't believe there's community water there yet, but we do have that liquid waste management plan that speaks to community sewer being extended in future. There's 300 to 400 units with that existing zoning. So that was basically what informed our decision. It's not like it's got no development rights out there. There's potential for a fair number of new houses to go in. So, and a commitment to provide servicing for those.
Do you have a follow-up question? No? Okay, just a sec. Councillor Barkle was first and then Councillor Carlson.
I was just wondering what exactly we're talking about here when you say Greta Ranch. It's two different parcels, right? We'll call, say, the south and the north. Mm-hmm. And they're owned by different people and they have different zoning. Mm-hmm. And then what about just immediately to the north of the one marked Greta Ranch, like beside it?
Yep.
Just how does that fit into the plan? What is it sort of zoning or plan?
Okay, well, so the short answer is we've tried to give names to all of our growth areas, and Greta Ranch has always historically been the shorthand that we apply to it. And yes, there are multiple parcels there. I don't know if there's a pointer on this thing, but at the south end is certainly the parcel adjacent to the campground is different than what's owned by Concord Pacific now, which I believe is selling off their parcels with that one. But Greta is just a shorthand title for it. The parcel to the north, it's hard for me to tell from here if it's ALR, but I believe it's got ag zoning. And, you know, similar to Summerland, when we did the OCP for Area F, we were obligated to draw these growth boundaries. And as part of that consultation process, this is what was identified as a suitable growth boundary for Greta Ranch, quote unquote. So the parcel to the north is out, so we envision no growth occurring there.
And with current zoning, you could put 300 or 400 lots in the parcel to the north?
No, within the areas that are...
Yeah, within the north part of the North Greta Ranch parcel then. The one Concord Pacific owns?
Yeah, again, I apologize, I don't have the zoning map in front of me, but if I recall, the north parcel has the medium density zoning. The southern part has the low density zoning and also the existing commercial tourist zoning.
So without any changes, there could be quite a bit of development, but you know, limited by sewer and water and mm-hmm. all those things. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Carlson, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Can you clarify what you mean by the district is committed to providing the services required to have development there? Does it mean electricity? Does it mean water? Does it mean sewer? Where is that commitment and when did we make it?
About 14 years ago, when Greta was last an active file, and there's a liquid waste management plan that's been adopted. And as part of that process, there were numerous options that were looked at, one of which was on-site sewer for Greta, potentially extending north to Peachland or being serviced by Summerland. And at the end of the day, the option that was decided on was being provided with servicing from Summerland. But it's not a one-way street. As I recall, Greta committed to a certain financial contribution to the extension of the sewer line, but that was many years ago. But so anyways, long story short, because there's a liquid waste management plan in place for this area, the only option for sewer is what's in that plan, which is connecting to sewer or Summerland. They can't do their own on-site system.
Thank you. Question for our Director of Development Services. How do we view, modify, discuss this plan?
I think we can at any point in time. We can probably bring it forward at a later point in time. It's a plan that was commissioned by the regional district through their electoral area F, I think, service area. I'm not exactly sure, but we were part of the development of the liquid waste management plan 14 years ago with our council. We were a stakeholder. But from staff's perspective, I think that actually does provide us a tool, if you will, to talk with any potential developer on that property with regards to servicing potential. Because right now it's very clear from the regional district's perspective that the only way that that parcel gets developed is if a sewer connection is provided from the district of Summerland. So that provides us an opportunity, I think, from staff's perspective.
So aside from the utilities that Councillor Carlson was talking about, what about fire services?
I'd have to get back to council on that. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if it's within a fire service area. I'd have to research it.
So what does it mean that they may not be within a fire service area? Well, I'm sorry, I just don't understand what that phrase means.
Well, it just means that because there hasn't been significant development to date, that there's been no desire or need to bring them into the fire service area, so they could be outside and not, like if a fire breaks out, they're on their own. But I suspect if this was to go and be developed, that there would be a desire to be brought into a fire service area. Whether they would attempt to try to create their own, or if they would petition for Summerland's fire district to respond, who knows? We'd have to wait till that day comes. So.
I think that day has already come, but did you have another question, Councillor Carlson?
Just very brief. I'm just wondering how many kilometers from Summerland is Greta? Is it 10?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, I'd say roughly that. Yeah, 9, I think, point something. So about 10.
Thank you very much. I think this is a really interesting piece of what's come forward, and I hope that as this RGS review continues, we have some input on this as soon as we can, because I think it would be oversight not to discuss the reality of whether or not a sewer is ever going to go from Summerland out to Greta. Thank you.
Councillor Patton and then Councillor Traynor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, this is a great piece of information that we know now, especially if there's 9.6 kilometers of sewer line that has to go in. So as it is a plan, there is always the opportunity with mayor and council that we could opt out of this plan, because right now, as far as sewer goes, because right now, any development that would happen on that Greta Ranch, whether it be the piece to the south that was just sold off by auction last year, or the original Greta Ranch where the winery is attached, where some development has already occurred and then was stopped, there's nothing can happen there then, because there's just no way that there's anybody going to be, no matter how much money, going to run 10 kilometers worth of sewer to hook up into the district's infrastructure. Am I thinking this the right way, or am I kind of off in left field somewhere?
Well, I mean, stranger things have happened. You never. Well, and I say that in the context of you never know what kind of development proposal somebody's going to come forward with, and the finances around that. And I mean, I'm by no means an expert in liquid waste management plans. I'd have to defer to our engineering department on that. But I think it was a tripartite agreement. So it's not just a matter of Summerland saying we want out of it. That'd have to be negotiated with not only the regional district, but I think the province had a strong interest at the time, as I recall, in also having the campground connected up, because of course for them it's 2 months of heavy use on their sewer system and then 10 months of not. And so being able to connect into a community system would be beneficial. So I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just, it's going to be a lot of negotiations involved, I think, in changing that liquid waste management plan.
Councillor Traynor and then Councillor Holmes.
Chris, can you just clarify for me one more time what this could potentially change again? So it's the suitability of Greta Ranch as a rural growth area. And if we change it, we take it out, then what would it be again? Like, what would it go to?
Just trying to see if I have it on one of the slides here.
Sorry, this might be obvious for some. I just need to be reminded exactly again.
Is it rural residential? Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Back to the west bench.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I'm good now.
Councillor Holmes?
So considering that these kind of tripartite negotiations would need to happen before anything happens there, I then don't really understand why then you're proposing to change the designation. Why don't you just leave it tourist commercial? I don't know what the so I see here what the rural residential area requirements are, but I don't know what the tourist commercial and how they compare. But why don't until there's certainty there, I don't see how you can make any changes at all. I mean, my gut feeling is a campground would probably be a pretty good thing to be put right there, but I don't know.
Okay, so well, I guess my response is it's not going to be, I don't want to say clean, but like with this change to the RGS designations, staff are not proposing changes in the electoral areas. I mean, the municipalities can do what they want, but in the rural areas, we're not proposing changes to zoning as a result of what comes out of this RGS review. So again, I mean, we refer to it in the office as the Butler property, which is just to the south of Greta. We would not be changing or proposing a change to that tourist commercial zoning. It would remain as is. But we also know that everybody who's come to our office over the last couple of years has wanted specifically to change that zoning to something else. And so that's where the issue became when that rezoning was before the board. And it wasn't consistent with the RGS to go to the medium density zoning that they had requested. And as a growth area, we argued at a staff level that yes, it was. I mean, obviously the board had a different opinion, which was fine. But if we change that from the rural growth area to now this rural residential area, I think the third dot point here is basically saying limit development to existing residential densities, right? So that's easy to interpret for Greta, but what does that mean in the context of the Butler property, which is a tourist commercial and could have a campground with a multi-unit motel or hotel associated with it? I'm not sure at this point, so.
You're sorry you came as a delegation to this council? We appreciate you being here. Are there any other questions for Chris? Great. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, we're on to item 6, the first of 2 public comment opportunities. Bye, Brad. Do we have anybody other than Marianne? Okay, please come to the podium, Marianne, and we'll get you started there.
Marianne McDonald, 6505 McDonald Place. I did have concerns about the Greta Ranch development, especially with the sewer line going in, given that Summerland will reach a capacity at some point, and adding that on, plus with your development going on in town, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. And he left, and it was a question for Chris, and I was wanting to know, when they were talking about the growth areas, were they talking about the 95% as encompassing all of the areas or each individual community? That was the question. So he's gone. So thank you.
My interpretation is that it's all of the areas. The easiest way to find out is simply to call Chris at RDOS. Yeah, thanks for your question, Marianne.
Will do.
Okay. Okay, on to our business items. 7.1, 2021 Statement of Financial Information, and Renee Belchik is on the line to present us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes. Municipalities are required to prepare a Statement of Financial Information report, which is commonly referred to as the SOFI, on an annual basis. The SOFI discloses detailed information that's not found in the district's audited financial statements. This information includes a schedule of severance agreements, a schedule of remuneration and expenses for employees that earn over $75,000 in gross salary, and a schedule of payments for the provision of goods and services. In total, the district expended $36.5 million in 2021, and 7 additional employees were added to the over $75,000 wage disclosure, bringing the district's total to 45 employees. With council's approval, the 2021 SOFI will be submitted to the ministry prior to the June 30th filing deadline to meet our statutory reporting requirements. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Anyone have any questions for Renee? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a general one on SOFI. I know that the number is $75,000. I'm wondering how often is that number changed and who changes that number?
Thank you, through the mayor. I know that number has been, with all the inflation and numbers increasing over the years, I know that number has been thrown out to say, is this reasonable? Should we be increasing it? It would be the ministry that does that. And so it has been brought to them, not specifically by us, but by other governing parties. And there's no indication that it will be increased, but I can only assume it will in upcoming years.
That's the Minister of Finance?
Yes.
That ministry, okay. Could I have, are there any other questions? Could someone bring forward the motion, please? Councillor Holmes, thank you.
That the District of Summerland's 2021 Statement of Financial Information be approved for filing with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and that the Mayor and the Director of Finance be authorized to execute all documents related to this matter.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Carlson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. .2 is the 2021 annual report. All of council should have one in front of them. And this is going to be introduced by Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say 2021 was a challenging year. Obviously, the pandemic in full force. I just had come into the organization, so 2021 was my first full year. So staff were contending with that transition in leadership. And yet, as you thumb through the report, you can see the incredible work and progress that was made, not only in the day-to-day delivery of our regular services and service levels, but also much work towards council's priorities beyond those things. So very proud of staff, very proud to have led the organization through the 2021 year, as our incredible team has done so much to deliver for the District of Summerland. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kendra.
The annual municipal report is prepared and considered by council each year and includes a progress report in relation to the district's objective measures and how they integrate with council's strategic priorities. The annual report also includes the previous year's permissive tax exemptions, audited financial statements, and a listing of municipal services and operations. The report has been posted on the district's webpage for the public to view for 14 days as required, and an advertisement was placed in the June 16th and 23rd editions of the Summerland Review. No written submissions or questions regarding the report were received by the public, and with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Happy Kendra? Okay, Just a comment, I think it looks fantastic. I appreciate yours and your team's hard work on this one. Council, could someone bring forward the motion, please? That we accept this consider and receive. Thank you, Councillor Barkle. Seconder? Councillor Patton? All in favor? Thank you. (7.3) UBCM grant application to support emergency planning for prolonged high heat weather temperatures. And this is for Odessa, and she's sitting there already.
Great, thank you. So I have a report today for information as, not for information, as a request for decision for a resolution by council to support the District of Summerland to participate in a joint UBCM grant application through the Regional District of the Okanagan-Similkameen, the Village of Karamios, the Town of Soyuz, and Town of Princeton. This is part of a larger grant application to support community emergency preparedness for heat risk mapping, assessment, and emergency planning. So following the 2021 heat dome, UBCM has released a stream of funding specifically to address heat risk mapping, assessment, and planning for local governments in BC. The district currently does not have any approved or formalized policies, guidelines, or bylaws to provide guidance for a response for future heat waves or extreme heat events. Bulk of the work proposed by RDOS as per the grant application includes a risk assessment for heat mapping, an emergency response plan, an analysis of current and future infrastructure, and development of a template bylaw for each community's use for those who participate. The due date for the grant has been extended to June 30th with an issuance of the grant 30 days past receipt. And the work itself would take place shortly after, approximately from August of this year to Q2 of 2023. Related legislation and policy includes the Community Energy and Emission Reduction Plan, which states actions to address and prepare for extreme heat and poor air quality events. This would come at no cost to the district, as the UBCM grant covers 100% of the cost up to $30,000 per community. As per the attached amendment, as per the attached document, $300,000 is being proposed, which is a total amount for the proposed 10 communities that will take part, in addition to an in-kind amount of funding provided from RDOS. So we will not be required to provide any additional funding outside of the grant amount and what RDOS is providing. So council has two options to support the proposed resolution as drafted or to refer to staff for other options. Thank you.
Thanks, Odessa. Questions, council? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the total grant amount would be $300,000 that we would be going with our in-kind or our contribution of 103,000 less whatever we get from the regional district. Is that how I read this?
Through the chair. So this would be a $400,000 total application. So the 300,000 is coming from the 10 communities with 30,000 each from the grant itself. And then the extra 103,000 and change would come from RDOS as part of their in-kind contribution for the staff work and resources that they would provide.
Other questions? Okay, could I have someone read the two-part motion, please? Two-paragraph motion. School's over, isn't it, Councillor Holmes? Councillor Traynor.
That the District of Summerland participate in a joint UBCM grant application submission with the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, the Village of Karamios, the Town of Osoyoos, and the Town of Princeton to the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund to support extreme heat risk mapping, assessment, and emergency planning, and that the District of Summerland Council support the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen to apply for, receive, and manage grant funding on behalf of the District of Summerland.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Holmes? Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I have one question, and this might be for Kendra, and then I have a comment. To show our support, is that writing a letter to show support, or how does that work?
It would be by the resolution itself.
But that's all we need, okay? And my comment is really, really pleased to see that the joint request includes all of the four First Nation communities in the South Okanagan Similkameen. That's really important. Thank you. Okay. Any other discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. Time for a break, and we're actually 10 minutes ahead. Thank you, Odessa. Thank you, everyone. Let's take a break until 2:15, and then we'll get on to 7.5. Okay, we'll carry on with our meeting. 7.5 Council Remuneration Report. And this is for Kendra as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before council is the Council Remuneration Task Force report on recommendations regarding council remuneration, expenses, and benefits. The task force met several times over the last 2 months to consider and make recommendations relating to remuneration, benefits, and expenses. At the request of the task force, the district staff conducted research in accordance with the terms of reference and best practices outlined in the UBCM Council and Board Remuneration Guide. Information was gathered from various municipal websites and other recent council remuneration reviews undertaken by comparable municipalities. The task force originally selected 22 similar jurisdictions in terms of population, location, scope of services provided, growth rate, economic makeup, tax base, and average and size of operating budget and number of staff. The District of Summerland staff canvassed these organizations for more detailed information about their remuneration, non-monetary perquisites, and benefits and allowances. At the request of the task force, the scope of comparator jurisdictions was narrowed down to 9 to provide a more accurate data set. After consideration of the research, the recommendation of the task force are as follows: that mayor and council remuneration be increased by 2% starting January 1st, 2023, that the 2023 CPI yearly adjustment to mayor and council remuneration be paused until a future review by the task force, and that the council remuneration task force reconvene in 18 months to review mayor and council remuneration and CPI adjustments against inflationary implications and the approaches taken by other municipalities in the intervening period. They further recommended that the limit for the following meal expenses be increased. So the breakfast per diem increased from $15 to $18, the lunch per diem increased from 20 to 24, and the dinner per diem increased from 35 to 45. And further, the task force recommends that council be eligible to roll in a benefits package with the council member paying 50% of the premium and the district paying the remaining 50%. The report from the task force provides reasoning for the recommendations put forward. One task force member, Dan Layton, is in the audience should council have any questions, either of him or of staff. And additionally, should council choose to adopt the task force recommendations, policy 100.1, the reimbursement of expenses, and 100.17, council remuneration, would require amendments to accommodate and reflect the task force recommendations. Additionally, council may choose between the district's benefit package or the UBCM group's benefit package for elected officials. The costs are outlined in the report. And again, with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Council, do you have questions of Kendra or Dan? Councillor Barkwell.
I was just wondering whether it was considered to just tie per diems for meals to publish provincial or federal per diems instead of having to review it all the time. They change them and they're readily available.
So the task force didn't specifically consider it in that lens. They just considered on what costs of meals are roughly now and chose to recommend the increase to the prices. But if that's something council is interested in, that could be an amendment to the policy, should you choose.
I have a question related to that. I think in early 2022, we got an updated form from the Director of Finance about travel expenses, the per kilometer reimbursement. Does anyone remember that? Yeah. I'm wondering if, thank you for confirming that. I'm wondering if, I guess no, never mind. I was going to say, I wonder if that should be tied into this policy as well, but it's more of a reimbursement rather than like a per diem or a remuneration. So never mind. Or did you want to respond?
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure mileage in policy, I think it's 100.1, includes the reimbursement for mileage, and I think it is tied to the federal or whatever rate that they choose.
Okay. Councillors Holm and Trainer.
Yeah, thank you. But I agree with actually your initial line of thinking. It is a reimbursement of an expense, meals. I mean, for us on council, it's not that. I mean, in normal times, what I have maybe 2 meals a year that I might claim. So it's more of a district-wide thing that we just all follow, and it's reimbursing your meals when you're away. And surely there's some sort of industry standard or something that we should just automatically follow. I mean, for the whole district, I don't really see this as a council benefit at all. It's something completely separate. And so it should be done along the same lines as mileage for driving. I don't see the difference myself.
Councillor Trainer?
I'm just wondering, what remuneration do we get each year? Like, what does it increase each year? Is it cost of living, or like I see here, they recommended 2%, but what have we been getting? Is it 2%? We've already been getting 2% each year, like with all staff, is that right?
So the council policy, so policy 100.17 says council's yearly adjustment is for the BC All Consumers Price Index. So we actually did pull a table for this and provide it to the task force. So it's been around 2%, but it hasn't exactly been 2%. I know for 2022, the increase was 2.8, I believe, %.
So 2 would just keep it at 2 then, I guess, until we change this policy again?
Yeah, so I think the intention with just increasing it by 2 and not doing the CPI was because CPI is such a large increase that it would still be 2%. So there still would be an increase to council remuneration, but that the task force would meet probably beginning of November or December of 2023 so that they can reconsider and establish should it be, and who knows what they would come with at the time, but it would be, should council be offered CPI to a maximum of 3%, in the circumstances where CPI is potentially 7, 8, 9, 10%, or if maybe it's just a 2% increase, so it'd be to look at that whole portion of it.
Okay, and they want 18 months just because of kind of everything that's changing right now? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barkwell?
Yeah, Councillor Holmes is correct. Other people have done all the thinking and worrying about what the appropriate rate should be. And the federal Treasury Board breaks it down by province. The provincial government has its own. I was thinking that if this group is willing to meet again in 18 months, it's not such a big amount, a big deal that we just put it on the table for them to consider which one they would think would be appropriate to follow when they reconvene in 18 months. To give them that direction, and somebody can remember.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so the motion goes on for about a page. It's an SAS. So, Kendra, are you okay with us not reading it aloud? I know that it's not very good practice.
I'm okay with it. I'm just looking at it though, just considering everything that was said, it would be removing B from the first motion because they are split in two. So the first motion would be it'd be 1A, C, and D, but we would remove the C and D and the A. And then the second one, we would amend it. You would take out the first part of that motion and then provide a further motion or an amended motion that the task force be directed to look at meal per diems in 18 months.
So you're suggesting that the things related to meals come out and then just follow a provincial standard, or
I could, how about I read it out as what I.
Okay, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Holmes, you have a question?
Yeah, can I ask another question if I may? Regarding the premiums for the benefits. So we already have the option of joining the district's benefit plan, right? We have to pay we'd pay 100% of the premiums. That's correct. So the question isn't whether we are offered a benefit plan or not. The question is whether the district ought to pay a portion of that, of the premiums, correct? Okay, so I guess my question is, why should it? What is the reasoning for taxpayers to pay 50% of our premiums, and why 50%?
Can I go to Dan or to comment on that? Is that appropriate, seeing as he was on the task force? Would you care to comment about that or answer that? Thank you.
We looked at that particular subject on that, and as elections come up, we're always looking as a committee that you want to always entice younger generations to get into your municipal services. Otherwise, it's just a stalemate over and over and over. So we looked at some options for a new electees, and let's face it, a lot of the younger people don't have the benefits that maybe some of us are privileged to nowadays, or have jobs that have higher benefits. So that is the reason why we looked at that, and we didn't think 100% was sufficient. I don't think that. I think that's far-reaching. I do understand that the mayor and council put a lot of work into running a municipality. I know that from experience myself. But to entice new people, you have to have something for them. I know a lot of the younger people may be committed to the community, but they don't see any benefit to them. And that's one reason why we put that particular item in there, and to see if there was any interest in that way. Other than that, it could go back to status quo as council sees fit.
Thank you. Precisely the reason that SILGA recommendation went on to UBCM. It was debated at SILGA, but that it went on to UBCM, so that people that are young people or otherwise people that otherwise don't necessarily have a voice could consider running for council. It's important. Councillor Barkwell. Thank you, Dan, for your answer.
I'm not sure what Kendra thought I was saying, but I wasn't suggesting that we don't go ahead with the current increase. Just do the current increase, and then next time look at tying it to something else, so it doesn't have to be discussed. And yeah. Okay.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Barkwell. I think that putting that in there at this time makes sense. And then also, if there is a industry standard to follow that. I also think that I appreciate the input from this committee, especially when it comes to the option to opt into a benefits package. Doesn't mean that councillor would have to do it, but it certainly, I can see how it could potentially incentivize someone to participate. So I would support all of those things as they were brought forward from the committee.
Great. Okay, we don't have a motion on the table. Well, we do kind of. So we're not referring to the, right? Okay, so it's as written. Please go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
I will move that council remuneration task force recommendation be adopted as follows: that the mayor and council remuneration be increased by 2% starting January 1st, 2023. And that the 2023 CPI yearly adjustment to mayor and council remuneration be paused until a future review. And further, that the council remuneration task force reconvene in 18 months to review mayor and council remuneration and CPI adjustments. Do I want to add something here? No. Against inflationary implications and the approaches taken by other municipalities in the intervening period. And B, that the limit for the following meal expenses be increased: breakfast per diem increased from $15 to $18, lunch per diem increased from $20 to $24, and dinner per diem increased from $35 to $45. That mayor and council be eligible to enroll in a benefits package with the council member paying 50% of the premium and the district paying the remaining 50%. D, that the mayor and council technology allowance remain unchanged as presented in policy 100.17, council remuneration. And 2, that staff be directed to amend policy 100.1 to increase the following limits on meal expenses: breakfast per diem from 15 to 18, lunch per diem from 20 to 24, and dinner per diem from 35 to 45. And that staff be directed to amend policy 100.17 to include the 2023 CPI yearly adjustment to mayor and council remuneration be paused till council remuneration task force reconvenes in 18 months to review mayor and council remuneration and CPI adjustments against inflationary implications and the key approaches taken by other municipalities in the intervening period. Then further, that staff be directed to amend policy 100.17 to incorporate council eligibility to enroll in the benefits package, with the council member paying 50% of the premium and the district paying the remaining 50%.
Thank you. How can you tell you're a mom that reads daily to your kids? You're a great reader. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barkwill, thank you. And further discussion? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. I won't be supporting this. I'm not really convinced that benefits are enticement for potential candidates to run for office. I know it's presumed that's the case, but I've never really seen any reports or empirical evidence to demonstrate that. I really doubt it enters into too many people's minds when they decide to run for office or not, whether the council has benefits. And I think once you start providing benefits, then local politicians, people start looking at locally elected people as professional politicians. And I don't think we should be going down that road at all. I think we're community members, and you don't necessarily change what you're doing just because you're on local council. If you're working full time, you continue working full time. You don't give up your job. You don't give up your family. You just continue as is, and so it doesn't make much difference, in that respect. The benefits, nothing changes. So I just I'm not comfortable with that, and so I won't be supporting this. Thanks.
Councillor Carlson.
I think that if in 2014, I probably still would have run for office, and had there been a affordable benefits package, it would have been a really nice bonus. I do also think that having 2 young children, and sometimes I have a full-time job, and it makes it hard to come to council when it's extremely busy and I don't have someone helping take care of my children. And it would make a huge difference to have that extra incentive and that extra support in order to be here, because I give up a lot to be here.
Councillor Patton and then Councillor Barkwill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm in agreement with Councillor Holmes. When we look at a 1% tax increase for our citizens is $100,000. And if we took at the 50%, at 7 of us at $2,400 a year, is going to equate almost to 20% of that 100,000 in a tax increase based on 1%. So I'm with Councillor Holmes. I don't think I will move forward to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Barkwill.
I don't necessarily agree with 2 of my fellow councillors here in that you can't quantify and what makes someone want to run for council. You can't say, well, I'm going to run for council if there's benefits and I won't run if there aren't benefits or anything like that. It's too subjective. It's just all sort of fits into a larger picture. You can't say if it's 15,000 versus 16,000. It's a range. You want to stay within that range. And I'm not doing this for myself. I have benefits already, but I do see the argument that it is something that can help compensate for what more often younger people would need or look for in some sort of compensation for the time and effort that they have to, something that's somewhat meaningful to them. And so, I think maybe some councillors will take advantage of them, some won't, but it'll be there, and it's all part of the larger package.
Okay, anyone else? I will call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you, Kendra, and thank you, Dan, and the other members of the task force. Okay, it's now time to close the meeting to the public. Thanks for being here. Could I have someone bring forward that motion, please? Close the meeting. Councillor Holmes, Councillor Traynor, all